Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Sunday, July the 18th, 2021. It is currently 5:46 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you're listening live, feel free to say hello in the chat. If you're not listening live and you're listening at some other time and you have questions or you have thoughts, and after you hear what I'm about to speak about, after you hear this teaching, you may have lots of thoughts and lots of opinions. Feel free to email them to me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Now, let me ask you a question, and I want you to be brutally honest, okay? When I ask questions, I do not like church answers, okay? Church answers are really not answers. Church answers are simply usually our attempt to make ourselves look more righteous and more godly than we really are. I hate church answers. I hate wearing a church mask. Let's take off the church mask. No church answers. I need brutal honesty here. I need you to be very real with me, okay? And I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to phrase this in a lot of different ways with a lot of different scenarios to try to see if I can really bring something out of you to make you look at yourself. I'm going to try to bring something out of you so that you can look at it and go, "Oh boy, maybe I've been thinking about this wrong for a very long time." Let me bring up a couple of scenarios, all right? Let's say you go to church with someone and they come into a lot of money, and the next thing you know, you realize, wait, they keep missing church one Sunday after another Sunday. Okay, well, anybody know what's going on? And someone's like, "Oh, you didn't hear?" Well, they came up with a lot of money, and well, they took off, and the last we heard is they're living in some other city, and they're doing drugs. They're drunk all the time. They're just blowing through the money. They're sleeping with all kinds of women. They've just like lost their minds. I mean, clearly they were just too weak when it came to money, and they just ran off, and they're just living. I mean, they're living it up, but they're ruining their life. They're destroying their testimony. I don't know what they're doing. It's sad. It's horrible. And you're like, "Oh, I didn't hear this." And then you're like, "Oh." You start telling other people, but I want you to just stop. Imagine yourself in that situation, and I want you to really think about this. What would your feelings be towards that person? What would your feelings be towards that person? Right at that moment. What your initial thinking? What would you be? Would you feel pity? Would you feel sorry? You're like, "Well, has anyone reached out to them?" Would you be trying to contact them to see what they could do, or would you be more interested in letting everyone else know what the person is doing? Would you just like, "Well, I knew that person was a loser from the start, and well, no surprise to me," because would you just have all kinds of negative feelings come up? How would you view that person if, say, 3 months later, 4 months later, 5 months later, they showed up? They pulled up in the parking lot of your church. And they come back. And they're broken and they're repentant. Would you look at them like, "Well, yeah. I guess when all the money ran out, you decided to come back. Yeah, whatever. We've been here the whole time." And you would just always view them as less than, weaker than you, pathetic, whatever. Yeah, you did it. You did all of that. So who cares? You just sit in the back and be quiet. How would you view them? Now, I know you would disguise your feelings in really good religious terms because if you go to church, you learn how to play that game. How would you view them? I mean, honestly, how would you view them? Let's pose a different question. What if you knew someone who went to your church, and maybe you believe that alcohol is perfectly okay? You believe alcohol is okay. And they start coming over to your house, and you offer them a beer, you offer them a mixed drink, you offer them alcohol, and they keep coming over and they keep drinking with you. And, nobody's really getting drunk. You're trying to follow the scriptures and nobody getting drunk, but you don't believe there's a problem or even a danger with alcohol. So you just keep letting them drink. And all of a sudden, 3-4 months go by and well, you start hearing stories that this person is drinking a lot, and maybe it's now sliding over into drunkenness. And next thing you know, the person just is drinking and drinking and drinking. And about 7 months later, 8 months later, they're a full-blown alcoholic. How do you view that person? Do you like, man, they're pathetic? What? So a few drinks turned you into alcoholic? Man, they're so weak. They're so pathetic. And you don't take any responsibility for your own actions. Of course not. Why would you take any responsibility for your own actions? But you just see them as weak. And then say finally, maybe they go to rehab. Maybe they have to start working on some program to try to get them, to stop being an alcoholic. They pull themselves back out of it. And they, with, the help of God, the grace of God, how would you view them from that point on? Always some kind of a secondary Christian because look what they did. Look what they did. How would you view them? Would you view them as weak? How about here's a person who struggles with maybe overeating, weight problems. They can't keep the weight off. And every time you see them, there they are, going through the McDonald's drive-through, and there they are stopping by the ice cream place. And you just constantly, and do you view them as like, what's your problem? Just stop eating the bad stuff and just eat right. Do you view them as weak? Do you talk about them? Do you gossip? Here's the question. How do you view people who are weak? How do you view people who are weak and stumble and fall maybe because of a weakness? Do you simply judge them, condemn them, gossip about them, slander them? I really want you to be honest with yourself. Some people view weakness, it bothers them, it angers them, it irritates them. What is your problem? Some people are not very patient with other people's weakness, other people's issues. But let me ask you a question. Scripturally, not based off how Christians act in church, because I am constantly telling you there's a difference between Christianity and churchianity. Forget how many people act in the church. When it comes to the weak, what is your scriptural and biblical obligation? Do you have a scriptural and biblical obligation? Well, I want us to open up, if you can, to Romans chapter 15 for kind of a little devotional study this evening, a little devotional study. And I want us to consider just a couple of verses in Romans chapter 15. Now, here at Victory Baptist Church, we're currently in Romans chapter 8. We're looking at 6 words every Christian should know. This morning, we started looking at the word foreknowledge, and we're going through that. We're going through that in a very kind of unique way, the way I'm approaching each word, and it's going to be controversial. So it's going to take us a long time to get through Romans 8. Who knows? It may be the end of this year before we get done with chapter 8. At some point, we will get to chapter 15. At some point, we will get to chapter 15. And when we do, we'll probably dive into this concept even in a more in-depth way. And we'll look at this in its maybe fuller context, because there's a lot happening before Romans 15. And Romans 15 kind of picks up the thought. But I'm just going to look at these verses tonight in more of a devotional way. I will try to place them in some level of context, but I want you to just really consider them. All right, here we go. Romans chapter 15, verse 1. It's very simple, very straightforward. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. All right. Now, if you go back to chapter 14, he's going to talk about a lot of issues where you may have someone who's weak, someone who may stumble, someone who may fall, someone who may have a problem. And those who are strong, instead of condemning them, looking down upon them, we should do whatever we can to bear their infirmities, to bear their weakness, and not to please ourselves. In other words, even if we have to sacrifice, even if we have to give something up for their benefit, we should be willing to do so. But I think there's a deeper issue here. It's more than just what willing to give up. How do you view the weak? How do you view weak people? How do you view people who fall? How do you view people who stumble? How do you view them? I watched this in the military in many situations, whether it was basic training or maybe it was one of the academies, the Airman Leadership Academy or the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. In some situations, we would be put in a place where either we had to all march, we were doing marching drills, right? Marching, and one person would keep messing up. One person would get out of step, and you would get irritated. Keep getting yelled at. What are you doing? We're going to do it again. You're like, would you please get this right? I remember, how did this work? I think we were in basic. And what they made us do is they made us take off our uniform, and then we had to lay down in the bed. It was like middle of the afternoon. It was hot. I don't remember everything that was going on, but it definitely was warm. So we had to take off our uniform, lay in bed. Then they sounded off reveille, and then we would have to jump out of bed, get in full uniform, make our bed, and then get downstairs. I'll run down all the flights of stairs and then line up in formation, right? And they wanted us to be able to pull this off, and I think 60 seconds or 90 seconds. I don't even remember what the time was. It was some ridiculous time. And you would jump up, get ready, go, run down, okay, get in line. And of course, there would be someone who didn't do it in the time. And guess what happened? You all had to go back up and do it again. And you'd be like, what is your problem? Okay, do it right. And they almost led you to do this. And it's sometimes in the military, and you've probably heard stories about this in basic training, if you're in the military, that would put you in this situation where one person's mess up impacted everyone punished for it, right? So if it'd be like someone can't get their marching right, we're all out there marching extra. Someone can't do something we're doing with, running, maybe it was running, someone is behind, well, then everyone else has to run more. Someone can't do enough push-ups, everyone else has to do more push-ups. And sometimes it led to, there's no way to say this, really bad things happening to that individual. Sometimes they would get, let's just say physically punished for their failure. And it was basically they were saying, you better step up because we're tired of you. We're tired of you. Their obligation was, we're going to motivate you through physical pain. We're not going to seek to help you, right? And so people would get tired of those who are weak. And I could give countless other stories. What is your obligation here? What is your obligation? And in this particular case, there's people in chapter 14 are suffering with all kinds of weakness. And then in chapter 14 and chapter 15, those who are strong, we have to bear the infirmities of the weak. We are to bear the infirmities of the weak and not please ourselves. So in other words, we have to do, according to the biblical model, I've got to do everything I can to help that person who is weak, and not to please myself. Even if I have to give up something, if I have to suffer something for the benefit of someone else. And that goes against everything in your nature and my nature. Again, in the military situations, you would just get mad at the person. You would get ticked off at the person. You'd be like, okay, it's almost like, what do we got to do to get rid of this person? What do we got to do? Let's see if we can do something. It would almost like, you know what? Let's not help the person because that's going to prolong our misery. Let's see if it gets bad enough that this person just gets kicked out or gets removed from our flight and gets put somewhere. Sometimes it would almost turn into that. And again, that is not the biblical mindset. Now, and sometimes as America, it's like, it's not my responsibility to help other people who are weak and who can't keep a job, who can't do this. We have a very idea that, you got to deal with your own problems. But is that the biblical idea? So let's take this apart, all right? And again, I could offer multiple illustrations. Let's start with this. We then that are strong, right? If you are strong, if you're demonstrating currently a spiritual strength, if you have a spiritual strength, you have a responsibility. Those who are spiritually strong, those who have not currently spiritually stumbled, fall, you're spiritually strong. You have an obligation to the weak. You have a biblical spiritual responsibility to the weak. And your biblical responsibility to the weak, let me make it very clear, is not gossip, slander, try to destroy, try to hurt. No. That is not your obligation. If you see yourself as the one spiritually strong, you have an obligation to the person who demonstrated spiritual weakness and who fell, who messed up. Now, what do you must do? You have to bear the infirmities. Bear the infirmities. Now, what is this? Let's go through a couple of words here. Let's go with the idea of bear, all right? Let's go with the idea. Well, first, I'm going to give you how the word bear is used in other translations, all right? The New International. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak, all right? Now, we'll get to the other words here. A New Living Translation. We who are strong must be considerate of those. ESV. We who are strong have an obligation to bear with. So most of the translations use the word bear. I think almost all the English translations do. So I'm going to go to the Blue Letter Bible app, as we always do, and let's look up this word bear. Okay? Let's look at the word bear here. To bear. All right? It is this Greek word. All right? Here we go.
Strong's G, 941. Bastadzo.
Now, bastadzo is used 27 times. It's used 23 times translated bear, 3 times carry, 1 time take up. The Strong's definition is to lift literally or figuratively, to sustain, bear, carry, take up. All right, it's used 27 times the outline of biblical usage, to take up with hands, to take up in order to carry or bear, to put upon oneself, to be carried. It's the idea of look, you're weak. I'm going to pick up and carry this situation. I'm going to pick up and carry you. I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to be there to carry you. Again, listen, we then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak. We'll take it this way. We need to take up and carry something. Let's state it this way. We need to carry, take up, bring upon ourselves. So we're strong. Here someone is weak, and we have a biblical obligation to take with our hands and to lift up and to hold on to. Now, specifically, this text says, for we then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities. The infirmities. Okay, what is the word infirmities? Let's look up the word infirmities here. All right, let's do this. Let's look up the word infirmities. The word infirmities is this.
Strong's G, 771. Asthenema.
Asthenema is this. It's used 1 time, infirmity. It means a scruple of conscience. That's interesting. Infirmity. The outline of biblical usage really gives us a little bit more detail, and this comes from, I think, Thayer's Greek lexicon. It means this. An infirmity of error arising from weakness of mind. All right? So it can be the idea that someone is weak in mind. There's a weakness. They're weak in mind. And that infirmity, whatever that weakness is, we are to come along and we are to bear it. We're to say, okay, you're weak here. Let me take it upon myself. Let me carry it for you. So we are taking the infirmity, the weakness of the weak. Let's go to some other English translations to see how they handle this completely. All right. The New International. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. The New Living Translation. We who are strong must be considerate of those who are sensitive about things like this. Now, they're referring to the things in chapter 14. These are situations where people are sensitive maybe to eating meat offered unto idols. They struggle with this. They struggle with that. They struggle with this. We've got to be sensitive to their struggles and their weaknesses. The ESV, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. The Berean Study Bible, we who are strong ought to bear with the shortcomings of the weak. There's the shortcomings of the weak. The Berean Literal Bible. Now, we who are strong ought to bear the weaknesses of the weak. The King James, bear the infirmities. The New American Standard, now we are strong, ought to bear the weakness of those without strength. All right? So you get the basic idea. We are to bear, we are to carry. I've got a commentary here the New Testament commentary, they offer the following concepts. All right, here we go. Listen carefully. We who are strong ought to bear the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. When Paul says we who are strong, he classes himself with the strong. When he continues, ought to bear the failings of the weak, he means a moral, spiritual obligation rests on us strong ones, namely not to think only of ourselves, but also of the needs of others, in the present case, the needs of those who are weak. You have a moral obligation, not, if you're strong, not to just consider yourself, but you're like, there is the weak. How can I help them? Let me go back to my military illustration. Okay, this person having some serious problems marching. Okay, what can I do? What can I do to help you? Now, guess what? You probably, when in the military, when you get a little time off from anything, you're like, okay, we're done with the day. Rarely do you want to say, okay, look, everyone else maybe want to run down to the commissary, to the base exchange to buy some candy or do whatever they can do, whatever freedom they may have. And you're like, you know what? Hey, look, you're having some serious problems. I want to go buy some stuff. I want to just rest. I want to make a phone call, whatever I'm trying to do. Me and you, let's go back to the marching pad and let's work on it. Let's work on it. We're going to work on this marching. We're going to get it right. We're going to see if you can get these techniques, if you can march in the correct way. Okay, whatever the case may. Okay, you can't get your bed made correctly. Okay, what? You can't get your clothes folded correctly. Whatever the case may be, there's all these crazy things you have to do in basic training. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do that. Now, that's a physical situation, but spiritually, it's the same way. You're having problems. I'm not worried about pleasing myself. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. You have that responsibility. Many Christians who don't fall, who don't demonstrate a weakness, they have no compassion for the weak. All they want to do is look down, slander, just destroy them. They literally want to push their faces down they see them there in the pigsty and they don't go, man, here's let me lift you up and I'm going to carry you back to the house. No. They were like, they're going to slam his face down in the mud and then look at him and go, you pathetic failure. And then they're going to go tell everyone else at church how bad the person was and how bad he stunk while he was, slopping around in the pigsty. That's not the way we're supposed to do it. We have a moral obligation. What Paul is saying here in Romans 15:1 cannot be far removed from his exhortation found in Galatians 6:2. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. The expression bear the failings does not merely mean to tolerate or to put up with those failings, or even bear with them and exercise patience with those who have them. It means, now listen, it goes beyond just tolerating, goes beyond just putting up with. We should put our shoulders under their failings and meaningfully help our weak fellow believers to carry them. Now, do you have that? Look, there's someone who's weak, who stumbled to fall. How can I lift them up? Now, we lose our patience. We may think bad about them. We may think they're weak. We may think they're pathetic. Or we may do that wonderful thing like, what were you thinking? What was your problem? I just don't understand how anyone could do that. How about, hey, here, get up. A fireman carry in the military. If someone's down, the idea, don't leave any man behind. They're wounded. Maybe they were dumb. Maybe they didn't follow an order. Maybe they completely messed up. Maybe they got scared and went the wrong direction and hurt themselves. And now you're irritated. The idea biblically is, you know what? I'm not going to please myself. It's not about me. I'm going to forget me and I'm going to run over there and I'm going to put that person on my shoulders, fireman carry, and I'm going to carry them out of this mess. Even though you may say, well, they deserved it. They deserved it. Yeah, okay, just keep that thought in mind because we'll get back to it, right? So we then that are strong, spiritually strong, ought to bear This is the idea, take up with our hands, lift up the infirmities, and the idea, the weakness, it may be the weakness of mind of the weak, and not to please ourselves. It's not about ourselves. It's not about ourselves. In fact, I'm going to do this. Go to Galatians chapter 6. Go to Galatians chapter 6, because this is such an important passage here. Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6. Now, if you go back to Galatians chapter 5, so if you're in Galatians 6, go back. If you just look in Galatians chapter 5, you'll notice that in verse 19, it mentions in Galatians 5:19, it mentions the work of the flesh, right? It says adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envying, murder, drunkenness, and reveling. Right? So it talks about these horrible things of the flesh. And then it says in chapter 6, verse 1, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault. I think this is the idea that if a man finds himself overtaken in one of these things, there's something horribly wrong. And if someone is overtaken in that, well, what happens if someone is overtaken in a fault? You which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest thou be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. What do? If you're strong and you see someone overtaken in a fault, they've fallen into one of these horrible sins, your job is now, it's your responsibility to go and say, okay, how can I restore you? I'm going to bear up your burdens. I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to carry you. A lot of people don't do that. They don't offer any help. They don't offer any assistance. They don't care because they're strong. And now guess what they get to do? They get to exalt themselves at other people's expense. This happens all the time within Christianity. Oh, there's some pastor you don't like their theology, you don't like their doctrine, you think they're garbage, and then they fall into sin, and you're like, I told you they were, woohoo, yeah, they fell. It's like watching the team you hate. Oh, I hate the New England Patriots. Oh, they lost. Yeah. What kind of unscriptural ungodliness is that? When you celebrate someone else's weakness and failure because it makes you look good? No, guess what? They sinned and you sinned because you neglected your biblical obligation. There's no way to get around that. So let's read it again. Romans 15:1. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbor for his good to edification. What should be our focus? On other people. Now, again, the primary focus here in the context is if someone is weak and they're struggling and they're stumbling, then guess what? I may have to give up something in order not to cause them to stumble and fall. In other words, if you got people around you who may have a problem with alcohol, you got to give up alcohol. Even if you can say, well, I have a right to drink. You have a responsibility to help those who are weak. So you wouldn't want to do anything to cause them to stumble. Whatever the case may be, sometimes you've got to give up your rights for the good of other people. And sometimes you've got to not please yourself because it takes work and effort to try to restore and help someone who has fallen. And sometimes what pleases you may be their failure. It may make you feel better about yourself. It may make you feel more spiritual. And trust me, I've witnessed this nonsense happen. I've said it so many times. Look, I think everything that happened, all the doctrine and theology of Bethel Church, I completely disagree with. I completely disagree with it. But if one of their leaders falls into grievous sin, I'm not going to celebrate that. I'm going to be saddened by that. And if I was in a situation, I would do everything I can to restore them and help them and hopefully try to help them with their theology at the same time. But we see people as enemies sometimes, or just as weak and pathetic. Verse 3. Now here's the key verse, I think. For even Christ pleased not himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of them that reproached thee fell on me. Now, Christ did not please himself, but he took the reproaches upon him. Now, this is a quote. This is a reference from a passage in the book of Psalms. I'm going to open a commentary here and see what they have to say in regards to this. Romans chapter 15 here. Let me get back. I closed the commentary because I got all excited and making the points I was making. And I'm like, oh, let me close this and let me start preaching. And when you're doing a podcast and you're not standing behind the pulpit, we're standing behind the pulpit, I would just left the book on the pulpit, but I didn't. All right, here we go. All right. This is how this commentary handles it. For even Christ did not please himself, as it is written, the reproaches of those reproaching fell on me. Psalm 69:9. Psalm 69:9, meaning Christ is addressing God in Psalm 69:9. The idea is when Christ makes this reference to Psalm 69:9, he is addressing God and saying, for the sake of my people, I am taking upon myself the reproaches leveled against you. Hey, the reproaches that are meant for God the Father, then it's the idea that God the Son, I will take them upon myself. All right? The main lesson Paul is conveying is this. If Christ, the Holy One, was willing to take upon himself so much suffering in the form of insults hurled at him by his enemies, then should not we be willing to sacrifice just a little eating and drinking and pleasure for the sake of a fellow believer? If Christ was willing to do that, are we not willing to do that? Let me state it this way. All right? Let me see if I can help you. You may not realize this, but you were weak, so weak you were dead in your trespasses and sins. And you know what you deserved? You deserved eternal condemnation. You deserved hell, but Christ took upon your weakness, your sin, your reproach, and he took it upon himself and suffered for you to lift you out of your deadness, to lift you out of condemnation and place you before the holy God, declared righteous and holy because of his righteousness and his obedience. Now, if Christ did that for you, you know what we tend to do? Well, you know, and I'm strong. I don't have these problems. Well, guess what? You had lots of problems before your salvation. So maybe right now you've got it all together. Probably you think you have it together more than you actually do. Why would you look at other people that way? Why would you do that? Why would you look at yourself that way? Why? Now, the context, when Jesus uses Psalm 69:9, in fact, let me go. I'm going to go to Romans 15:3 and some other English translations just so that you'll see this. All right. Romans 15:3 from some other English translations. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. For even Christ didn't live to please himself. But as the scripture says, the insults of those who insult you, O God, have fallen on me. All right. That's Psalm 69:9. And in fact, if I remember correctly, let's see, that's Psalm. Let's see, he's quoting Psalm 69:9. He's quoting Psalm 69:9. I do think. Give me a second here. Yes, Psalm 69:9. For zeal for your house consumes me, and the insults of those who insult you fall on me. Okay, I thought the one commentary wasn't quoting the whole verse, and I knew something was missing there. So I was like, okay, wait a minute. The first part of Psalm 69:9 says, for the zeal of your house consumes me, and the insult of those who insult you fall on me. And then if you go to John chapter 2, this is the cross-reference I was thinking. John chapter 2. The commentary doesn't go this direction, but that's okay. I had to just start doing that on my own because I was like, wait a minute, something's missing here. Because I want you to at least see how this is quoted. In John chapter 2, if you don't remember correctly, Jesus sees what's happening in the temple, and let's just say he gets very upset about what's happening in the temple. He gets very bothered. He's insulted by it, and then he chases everyone out of the temple, all right? And if you look at verse 16, and he said unto them, take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. And his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. So part of that is quoted right there. Part of it's quoted right there. But there's two parts to Psalm 69:9. I think that's interesting. But even there, in a sense, the Father's house, that zeal, or his zeal for the Father's house is manifested. But as the insult, they were in a sense insulting God, and Jesus took that insult upon himself, and then he did something about it. But in a broader sense, we all insult God. We all, in a sense, insult God by our actions and by our sin. And Christ took our insult meant for God upon him, and he bore that insult, then bore the punishment that insult deserves. And then he did that for you and for me. Now, go back to Romans 15. Why do I emphasize all of that? Why do I emphasize all of that? I emphasize it for this reason. And I kind of left us hanging when we were going through verse 1, but I did so on purpose. You may look at these people who are weak, who fall, whatever the case, and you may go, what is your problem? Get over it. What is your issue? What is your issue? What you deserve punishment. And you may think that, but you need to stop really quick and look at yourself and look at what Christ did for you. Instead of pleasing himself, he sought to please the Father by redeeming you, saving you, and bearing your burden upon himself. He took upon your sin upon himself and suffered for you. In a sense, lifted you up and carried you into the presence of God, covering you in his perfect righteousness so that you could be declared righteous because of the imputed righteousness of Christ. And we can't do that for other people. We can't bear up other people's burdens. Now, I'm not saying we excuse anyone's sin. I'm not saying we excuse anyone's failure. We have to deal with that failure. But while we're dealing with it, sometimes we just want to condemn it, discipline it, remove it. But where's the picking it up and bearing with it? Where's like, oh man, you're struggling with that? Okay, how can I come along and lift you up? How can I bear that burden with you? How can I carry that with you? What burdens have you lifted off other people? Spiritual burdens. I'm pausing. I'm just giving you a second to think about that. I'm pausing on purpose. Okay, you may sit and hear me messing with my pencil, but I'm sitting here twirling my pencil around, just giving you time to. I really want that to just I want it to be a knife into your heart and really just go, man, I'm an arrogant, condescending jerk when other people fall and other people fail and other people are weak. I'm not patient. I'm not. And look, this happens in a lot of areas. I've stated it so many times, maybe not in podcast form, but I've stated this just talking to people. One of the areas at school that I'm horrible at, it comes to math, I'm finished, I'm done, all right? You get beyond 1 + 1, and I know you think this is hyperbole. You get beyond 1 + 1, and I'm probably going to start using my fingers and any other device I can find to help me count. I am horrible at numbers. I can't remember numbers. Mathematical formulas, like what? I got to solve for what? Wait, why is there letters? What's going on? I am horrible at math. But you know what I've discovered in some cases? Those math teachers who are just so strong at math and so good at math and they've mastered the subject, some of them are the worst math teachers in the known world because they have no patience, they have no understanding, they get frustrated. They're like, why don't you get this? What is your problem? This is so simple. I've already explained this to you. I've literally had math teachers say that. What is your problem? What is my problem is I don't understand it. But they didn't want to come along, in a sense, put their shoulder underneath my weakness and try to help bear that burden and help me through it. No, they just felt like you're a lost cause, you're an idiot, and I'm done. But I don't get, because they were so strong. Sometimes the stronger we are, and it's very true. We've talked about it. Sometimes those sitting in a church, isn't it great? Like how easy it is to preach a sermon condemning, like just going full blown, pulling out both guns and just blasting, blah, 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 blah. Sins that are not present in the church, right? You can go, and I'm moving my hands because there's some fly that's got into the church that's literally trying to attack. I need to tell you that I'm under attack by Satan. Okay, it's just this fly who just will not leave me alone. He keeps landing on the microphone. I don't know what he's obviously got something to tell you. Okay, and I'm about to just end his life, which I'm not bearing his weakness. His weakness is he's irritating. It's irritating me. Okay, but all right. I'm going to try to work that into an illustration, but I won't spend all the time doing that. All right. But the point is those sometimes when we are strong, back to the church, sometimes we'll, from the pulpit, we'll pull out those guns and blast sins that we are not very present probably inside the church, right? We'll blast the abortionist. We'll blast maybe the transgender, the homosexual. I mean, it's like, bah, 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 bah. And everybody's like, amen, brother. Amen. Right. I mean, yeah, go to town, right? No, how could we, now, by no means do we excuse sin. But if someone was struggling with that sin, the last thing they would want to let anyone know in the church. Because sometimes the stronger we are spiritually, sometimes we're not very good at our obligation of bearing those who are weak, those who have fallen, those who have stumbled, those who are overtaken in a fall, those who find themselves, the works of the flesh, that we can find ourselves sometimes overtaken in, right? Find ourselves stumbling into. Where is the ability to bear that burden and lift that person up? We've got to be able to do that. And I think I forget my obligation, right? I forget my obligation. There's times I've been weak and fallen, and I didn't feel, and a lot of other, now I've experienced people who did help lift up and bear that burden, and they dealt with it in a godly way. There were others who, they just wanted dirt and just cause pain and gossip and slander, and they did not meet their moral obligation. There's been times when I was the strong one, and I did not help try to bear the burden of other people who were weak. I've been, in some cases, on the end of the strong people not handling themselves correctly, and I've been on the side where I was the strong one and I didn't handle myself correctly. Now, nobody's saying excusing sin. No one is saying like, oh, you're good. No. Bearing that burden requires the burden of also saying, okay, you go and sin no more. We need to help you. It's also dealing with that as well. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because this fly is literally driving me crazy, and it's going to ruin this thing. It's literally like, if you could see me right now, you'd be laughing. Okay. I don't know if you need to bear the burden I'm currently having with this fly. It really is not, I don't know what is going on. It's absolutely crazy. Thing is like, it's like mad at me. I want to try to, it's right now. It's on the microphone. It's just looking at me. Okay. So I'm going to go. I apologize, but that's what happens in a live broadcast. Okay. I tried to stay quiet about it through the whole broadcast. I know at one point in the broadcast, I was trying to offer an illustration about what happens in the military. And then when I was in the middle of that illustration and I'm like, wait a minute, what point was I trying to make? Because the fly was so distracting me that I literally almost forgot the point. So if that got messed up, I apologize. And if there was anything else I did that didn't make any sense, it's because literally this thing will not leave me alone. Okay. So, all right. Yeah. I know what you're saying. I don't care. I know you don't care. I'm sorry. But I'm trying to give you the ability to bear my burden. I know what you're saying. There's not much I can do for you right now. I know you can't. All right. So, all right, I'm going to go. Everyone have a great night. I'm headed home. Thank you for listening. Hopefully something we did today was beneficial. If you did not hear the Sunday school lesson on Ezra chapter 8, I don't think it was well received. I kind of felt like the church didn't kind of like, whatever. They didn't seem to care too much. I thought it was really, 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 really important. So Ezra 8, it's called The Traveler's Text. You can find that under the VBC podcast. And then Romans 8, foreknowledge. It's called 6 Words, Foreknowledge. And that gets into some deep theological concepts about God's foreknowledge. You may find that interesting as well. And then hopefully anything else I did this afternoon was beneficial. All right, everyone have a great day, great evening, great week. God bless.